Hey yo guys and gals, GH here. Today we're going to play around with the healer build. Yup, a cleric build because almost all the builds that we do here is DPS. So I wanted to change things a bit and we're gonna be doing some support and healer builds and maybe crowd control in the future so that there's more variety. Anyway, the build we're showing today is Priest, Druid, and Paladin. This build is gonna be focused on healing and support, so we're not taking much of the offensive offerings of this class build. And with that said, here is Priest, Druid, and Paladin. Let's do this. Okay, here's the build. There's the Priest, Paladin, and then Druid. We're gonna start with Priest. And as we all know, Priest is the essential support class in the Cleric class tree. And the reason this class is here is because this build will be lacking the best spells a Priest offers if you didn't choose it. The Priest class is almost always needed in a good support build. The only exception is if your teammates are all OP and just needs a backup heal, just in case. But in most situations, you're gonna need it because of its spells. The first one is Mass Heal. It's an area heal, pretty straightforward. It's usually used when a significant sudden loss of HP occurred. That's when you use Mass Heal. Try to achieve at least 70 to 100k heal, and you can do that by increasing the attribute of Mass Heal and Guardian Saint buff, the Cleric spell, and of course, increase your SPR stat because it helps in increasing the amount of heal. The next spell is Revive. This is a bit of a confusing name for what it does. To keep it simple, I'm just gonna tell you guys. So what it does is gives you a buff for 2 minutes that prevents you from fainting. And what happens is when your HP reaches 0, you get automatically resurrected and given a buff that makes you immune to damage for 5 seconds. And as you can see, this is a pretty good buff. It essentially stops you from dying, and the cooldown is also 2 minutes, which basically guarantees auto-resurrection every 2 minutes. The other spells that we have here is Blessing, Aspersion, and Sacrament. These are the trademark buff of a priest. Max them all out, and that's mostly what you're gonna need for a priest. Now let's show Druid. Now I'm just gonna remind you guys again, this build is primarily a support build and is going to focus on support abilities. Okay, now Druids are clerics who uses the power of nature. They control plants to heal or damage enemies, and they can also transform into monsters. And the reason Druid is here is because of one spell that can give this build a pretty good sustained heal. And that spell is called Cortas Mata. And what it does is temporarily grow grass that can heal and damage enemies for 40 seconds. And there's an art for this that removes its capability to deal damage, and then it increases the healing factor of Cortas Mata, which results in an amazing heal that lasts for 40 seconds. And that's the only reason Druid is here. And of course, as most of you know, Druid is pretty awesome in terms of buffing oneself, but since we're not really focusing on the offensive, we're gonna leave it at that. Now for the last class, Paladin. Now Paladin is a class that uses holy power to protect allies and vanquish enemies through the blessing of the goddess. That's according to Toss. And the reason it's here is because I wanted another source of passive heal that I can use continuously and also give buffs that can provide more defense. And that's why it's here. Now that said, here are the spells. First off is Restoration. This grants you an aura that heals nearby party members every 3 seconds. It's an okay way to heal. It's useful when Cortas Mata is on cooldown. It's nice because it's always on. The next spell is Barrier. This is a circular form of barrier that pushes enemies away and grants increased magic defense. Now, there's an attribute for this called Devotion, and what it does is directs damage inflicted to party members inside the barrier to the Paladin. In short, the damage your teammates is receiving inside the barrier will be transferred to the Paladin, to you, which kinda sounds nice, but be careful using this because there are bosses in game that hits like a ton of brick, and 4 party members getting hit inside the barrier might hurt a lot. And we're not done with barrier yet. There's an art for this that reduces damage taken by 20% while inside the barrier, and damage taken through devotion is reduced by 50%. That sounds pretty awesome, and I bet it does. Maybe in the future we get to test it. The next spell is Sanctuary. This is a channeled area buff that increases physical and magical defense, and not just that, it also gives additional damage equivalent to the increased defense value. It's both offensive and defensive buff. And now for the last spell, and it's called Resist Elements. Now this one reduces the property damage taken of the whole party by 50% above depending on your attribute. And for those of you who don't know property damage, it's fire, ice, lightning, poison, and earth property damage. And that's Paladin, a tank support class that can surely help a party survive. And now that we got the classes out of the way, now let's do the good and the bad. Let's start with the bad. First bad thing that I noticed while playing this build is most people doing endgame content do not need the defensive capabilities of Paladin. So I kinda regret taking Paladin. If I look at it, Paladin is okay, but Pardoner might be a better healer or Kabbalist. Or I could have just taken Dieb for doing challenge mode. So there's a lot of options. Another bad thing about this build is holy fluff. You need a lot of money for this build. This isn't a build that you can just make and be satisfied with the results. So keep that in mind getting into this build. You need to be rich. I recommend making a scout farmer build before getting into this build. Lastly, I normally would say this build has no iframe, but technically it's not true because Fade, the cleric skill, gives you a half a second iframe, but a half a second iframe is kinda hard to time. So I guess that's a bad thing. And yeah, revive gives you iframe, but you can't invoke it manually. You need to die before it activates, so again, not reliable. So I guess that's the last con. This build has no reliable iframe, but if you're good at timing, good for you. And yeah, I believe every class build needs a mobility skill. 1 or 2, because sometimes having the ability to move quickly out of a bad situation is pretty nice. And that's another bad thing, you don't have it here. And now let's do the good stuff. And I can tell you right now, you are a freaking tank here. All the defense increasing spells of a paladin makes endgame content damage easier to handle. Another good thing here is this build's ability to sustain heal a whole party is pretty amazing. You can keep healing and there's only a short gap of opportunity that you don't have a form of heal because Cortas Bata lasts for 14 seconds with a cooldown of 20 seconds. So that's a 6-second gap that the area heal is weak because even with Cortas Bata down, restoration is always up. And if something happens when Cortas Bata is down, like a sudden significant decrease of HP happens, you will have mass heal to get your teammates' HP back up again. All in all, this is a very good healer build. If I were to make a healer build, this would be an amazing choice. And that's it guys, what do you think? Is the build fine as is? Or would you change a class for something better? Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you like the video, hit the thumbs up, share, and then subscribe to be part of the Gaming Hardcore family. And as always, this is Gaming Hardcore. See you in the next one.